Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. Foreign ministers from the world's largest economies have condemned Russia's brutal war in Ukraine after meeting with their Ukrainian counterpart.
A special meeting because...
In a statement, the G7 ministers said massacres carried out in Bucha and other parts of Ukraine were severe violations of international law.
The best way to help Ukraine now is to provide...
Ukraine is asking for new supplies of weapons to hold back a Russian onslaught in eastern Ukraine. As Russian forces withdraw from the north of Ukraine, more disturbing stories are emerging. Russian soldiers used people as human shields to protect themselves from counterattacks in northern Ukrainian villages. Today, addressing the Greek parliament, the Ukrainian president said Russia must be brought to justice. And condemnation of Russian atrocities continue to pour in from around the world.
The events we have seen uncovered in Bucha this week only reinforce the importance of strong global coordination in response to Russia for their actions.
South Korea's port city Busan staged drone performances to show a message of solidarity with Ukraine. In footage, hundreds of drones fly in formation to create the Ukrainian flag, as well as several peace messages, such as the depiction of the No War slogan. A total of 500 drones were used for the show. The trial in Turkey of 26 Saudi nationals accused over the notorious murder of dissident JAMAL KHASHOGGI in Istanbul in 2018 has been halted. A judge said the case would now be handed over to Saudi Arabia, which had refused to extradite the suspects. The Washington Post journalist was killed inside the Saudi consulate after being lured there. His murder by Saudi agents sparked worldwide outrage. A Saudi court convicted 8 unnamed people over the murder in 2019.
Because sometimes,
Khashoggi's fiancé said she would fight on. German lawmakers have rejected legislation imposing a COVID-19 vaccine mandate on people aged 60 and older, a setback for Chancellor Olaf Scholz and his health minister. After a testy debate in the lower house of Parliament, 378 lawmakers voted against the law and 296 in favour. Cheers from the ranks of the far-right AfD party, who had bitterly opposed it. Lawmakers were free to choose without necessarily following their party line, and some members from Scholz's ruling coalition voted against the law. The Central Committee of Sudanese doctors say a 19-year-old demonstrator has been shot and killed by security forces during the latest protests against last year's coup. It came as tens of thousands of Sudanese protesters marched in the capital Khartoum and more in towns across the country on the 3rd anniversary of the fall of former President Omar al-Bashir. They're rejecting the recent power grab by the generals that ousted him. Police also stormed a hospital in the capital Khartoum and fired tear gas in the wards on Wednesday. 94 protesters are now known to have died since Sudanese army officers derailed the transition to civilian rule in October. Torrential rain has pummeled Australia's east coast, with Sydney receiving nearly a month's rain overnight, turning suburban roads into rivers and triggering evacuations. Residents of a nursing home were evacuated overnight as emergency crews urged the harbour's cities 5 million to avoid unnecessary travel and brace for possible evacuations. Sydney has received 48 inches of rain so far this year, more than its average annual rainfall. There are warnings of further flooding as over the next 24 hours, many coastal towns could be hit with even more rain. And finally, Libyan authorities have received 9 ancient artefacts, including funerary stone heads, urns and pottery that were returned by the United States. All of the pieces had been illegally excavated and shipped to the United States, but they were identified by archaeologists working with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office in New York and have now been returned to the Museum of Libya in Tripoli. The grandest piece returned to Libya were the 4 funerary heads, marble busts including one whose sculpture had added a delicate stone veil that seemed to flow across the face. The pieces are now in the museum located in the central Tripoli palace of King Idris. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel Studios in Lagos.